Seals never miss. They mocked the first female sniper. Then her shot changed everything. The desert wind howled across the training range, kicking dust into the air like a warning.
Waiting confirmation.
Through the scope of her rifle, she saw nothing but heat waves and doubt.
Moving.
Around her, whispers spread. They said she didn't belong. They said she was a mistake, and some even said she would fail before she ever fired a shot. On the elite proving grounds where legends were made and reputations shattered, no one expected her to be the one who would silence them all. Welcome to United War, where true stories of courage, skill, and battlefield mindsets come alive. Today's story isn't just about a sniper. It's about pressure, perception, and the single moment that can change how the world sees you forever. She wasn't the first to try out for the program. Hundreds had stood on that same line before her. But she was the first woman to ever make it this far. The instructors watched closely from behind dark glasses, their faces unreadable. They didn't cheer, they didn't encourage, they only observed. Because in their world, encouragement didn't matter, results did. Behind her, a few candidates shifted their weight, pretending not to stare. They had already made up their minds. To them, she was just a headline waiting to fail, a story they could laugh about later. One of them muttered quietly, just loud enough for the others to hear. Seals never miss. Let's see if she even hits the target. A few smirks followed. She heard them. Of course she did. But she didn't turn around, didn't react, didn't speak, because she understood something they didn't yet. This test wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving herself right. The rifle rested steady against her shoulder. Her breathing slowed. The noise faded. The wind, the whispers, the weight of expectations, all of it drifted away until only one thing existed: the target. Far down range, barely visible to the naked eye, it stood like a challenge from fate itself. Most shooters struggled at this distance. Even experienced ones needed multiple attempts. And she had only one shot, one chance to prove she deserved to stand there, one moment that would decide whether she walked forward or walked away forgotten. An instructor's voice cut through the air. "Shooter, ready." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her finger rested on the trigger. Her eye locked through the scope. And in that silence, right before history changed, the entire range held its breath. The command finally came. Fire when ready. No countdown, no warning, just permission. The kind that separates talkers from shooters. Her finger tightened slowly on the trigger, not jerking, not rushing, just steady pressure, the way she had practiced 1,000 times before. Her heartbeat slowed, syncing with her breath. Inhale, hold, exhale. Through the scope, the world shrank into a narrow circle. Distance didn't matter. Noise didn't matter. Doubt didn't matter. All that existed was the crosshair and the truth it would soon reveal. Behind her, boots shifted in the sand. One of the candidates folded his arms, already convinced he knew what would happen next. Another tilted his head, waiting for the miss, waiting for proof that the instructors had made a mistake letting her stand there. They weren't watching a shooter. They thought they were watching a failure. She exhaled halfway and paused, the exact point where the body is stillest. Her finger finished its slow pull. Crack. The rifle spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a sharp, clean sound that cut through the air like a verdict. The recoil pressed into her shoulder, but she didn't blink. She didn't move. She stayed locked on the scope, tracking the shot the way snipers are trained to do. A second passed, then another. Downrange, something shifted. One of the instructors raised binoculars. Another leaned forward slightly. Still, no one spoke. The candidates behind her exchanged looks. One smirk faded. Another straightened his posture. Because something was wrong. Or rather, something was too right. The instructor with the binoculars lowered them slowly. For the first time she had stepped onto the range, his expression changed. Not shock, not excitement, respect. He turned his head toward the others and gave a small nod. That was all it took. A murmur rippled through the line of candidates. Someone whispered, "No way." Another muttered under his breath, "She didn't." But she had. Dead center. At a distance most shooters only talked about hitting. Still, she didn't celebrate, didn't smile, didn't even lower the rifle right away. Because deep down, she knew something they were only just realizing. One perfect shot doesn't prove luck, it proves discipline. And discipline is impossible to fake. She finally lifted her head from the scope and calmly set the rifle safe, her movements controlled, precise, professional. Not a hint of pride, not a trace of arrogance, just quiet certainty, the kind that can't be taught, the kind that's earned. Behind her, the same candidate who had mocked her earlier stared at the target through a spotting scope. His jaw slowly tightened, because the impossible had just happened, and everyone there knew it. But what none of them realized yet was that this shot wasn't the moment that defined her story. It was only the beginning.
Silence hung over the range like a storm that hadn't decided whether to break. The instructors didn't congratulate her. They didn't clap. They didn't even acknowledge the shot out loud. Because in their world, praise wasn't given for one perfect moment. It was earned over time, under pressure, when mistakes carried consequences. One of the senior evaluators stepped forward, boots crunching against gravel. He held a clipboard in one hand, his expression carved from stone. "Reset position," he said flatly. No smile, no approval, just the next command. She nodded once and returned to position. Most people would have felt relief after a shot like that. Most would have let pride creep in, even just a little. But she didn't, because she knew something most candidates learned too late. The military doesn't test your best moment. It tests your consistency. The wind shifted. A low gust swept across the range, rattling the targets in the distance. This time, the conditions weren't perfect. The air pressure had changed. The mirage shimmered harder across the ground. Even experienced shooters struggled when the environment turned against them. One instructor checked the wind meter. Another glanced toward her, almost as if waiting for the mistake. Behind the line, the same candidates who had doubted her earlier leaned in again, not mocking this time, watching, studying, trying to figure her out. Because now they had a new question. Was that first shot skill or luck? She adjusted her position slightly, pressing her elbow deeper into the earth for stability. Her movements were economical, practiced, efficient. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Her eyes scanned the distance, reading the wind the way others read words on a page. Tiny details most people would never notice suddenly mattered. The direction of drifting dust, the angle of heat waves of 100 meters away. All clues, all signals, all part of a silent conversation between shooter and environment. She turned a dial on her scope. One click, then another. Each adjustment small, each adjustment deliberate. An instructor spoke again. Second target, longer distance. A pause. Same rules. That meant one shot, no corrections, no second chances. A test designed to expose weakness. Behind her, someone whispered, "This is where it ends." But they whispered it carefully this time, because they weren't sure anymore. She settled behind the rifle again, cheek resting lightly against the stock. Her breathing slowed, steady as a metronome. Inside, there was no fear, only focus, because she understood something most people never learn. Pressure doesn't break you, it reveals you. Her finger found the trigger once more. The wind picked up, the mirage danced, the target waited, and every person on that range leaned into the moment without realizing they were doing it, waiting, watching, holding their breath. Because now, this wasn't just another test shot, this was proof. Proof of whether the first shot had been a coincidence or a warning. The wind pressed harder now, dragging grains of sand across the ground in thin, whispering trails. Conditions like these were exactly why most shooters dreaded long-range tests. Because distance wasn't the real enemy, uncertainty was. Through her scope, the target shimmered, not still, not clear, but shifting like a mirage. To an untrained eye, it looked impossible to hit. To her, it looked like a calculation. She inhaled slowly, held it, then exhaled halfway. Her body settled into stillness. Behind her, no one whispered this time. The doubt was gone. Now there was only anticipation. Even the candidate who had mocked her earlier leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on the distant target. He wasn't waiting for her to fail anymore. He was waiting to see if she could do it again. Because deep down, everyone there understood one thing. If she hit this shot, it wouldn't just be impressive, it would be undeniable. Her finger began its slow pull on the trigger. Not sudden, not forced, just steady pressure, smooth enough that even the rifle wouldn't know exactly when the shot would break. The instructors watched carefully. Wind ticked across the range. Dust drifted. Time stretched. And then, crack. The rifle fired. The sound snapped across the open ground and vanished into the distance. She stayed perfectly still, eyes locked through the scope, tracking the shot's path the way only trained marksmen could. A long second passed, then another. No one moved. Downrange, the target jerked. One instructor immediately lifted binoculars. Another stepped closer. The air felt heavier somehow, like the moment itself carried weight. The instructor lowered the binocular slowly, then looked at her. Not with curiosity, not with surprise, with certainty. He turned to the others and gave a single nod. Impact confirmed. A quiet ripple spread through the line of candidates. Not laughter, not disbelief, respect. The kind that isn't easily given, and once earned, is never taken back. The same candidate who had mocked her earlier exhaled under his breath, shaking his head slightly. He didn't speak, because there was nothing left to say. She calmly engaged the rifle's safety and stood, dust brushing lightly off her uniform as she rose. Her expression hadn't changed. No smile, no celebration. Just composure, because she hadn't come there to impress them. She had come there to belong. One of the senior instructors finally spoke, his voice steady, but unmistakably different now. Skill speaks louder than opinions. A pause. Remember that. His words weren't just for her, they were for everyone watching. On that range, something shifted that day. Not policy, not rules, perspective. Because the moment her shot struck dead center, every assumption about what she could or couldn't do disappeared with it. And the people who doubted her the most became the first to understand her value. Legends aren't born when people believe in you. They're born when they don't, and you prove them wrong anyway. This is United War, where discipline defeats doubt, and real warriors let their actions speak.